Hot dog!
In the 2012 elections, sports is more than just a backdrop or a photo op.
Competition that exists on the field in sports has now become almost day-to-day what it is in politics.
From the players on Capitol Hill.
If you look at what the divisiveness in Washington, what was bringing members of Congress together was athletics.
To mayors trying to keep local economies afloat.
All we're asking them is to put a little consideration into this and get to yes.
The game of politics meets the business of sports. Coming up on Sportfolio. Hello, I'm Rick Horrow. The economy election just 2 weeks away, and every industry in America has skin in the game and a stake in the outcome. And sports is no different. This week's Sportfolio focuses on the many ways that sports and politics intersect in the 2012 election season. Let's start at the very top of the ticket. The presidential contest is a horse race, and it'll be won by the candidate with the best ground game. That is, unless it's decided by a last-minute Hail Mary. But cliches aside, what does sports have to do with the battle for the White House? Whatever you think of his political game, Barack Obama has credibility when it comes to hoops. Obama has found strong support in the basketball community. In a recent survey of campaign contributions from NBA owners, executives, and players, the president held an edge over his opponent in both donors and dollars. During the Republican primary, Mitt Romney noted that he has many friends among NASCAR team owners, and indeed some of the biggest names in racing have put their cash behind the challenger. The majority of NFL owners line up behind the Republican candidate. Woody Johnson of the Jets chairs Romney's New York State campaign, and he made his priorities clear on Bloomberg Market Makers.
Now, what is a bigger priority to you right now? A winning season for the Jets or a winning election for Mitt Romney?
Well, I think you always have to put country first. So I think it's very, very important that for not only for us, but for our particular kids and grandkids, that this election come off with Mitt Romney and Ryan as president and vice president.
So Gang Green leans red, but there are true blue teams as well. Appropriately, 4 partners in the Los Angeles Dodgers ownership group have combined to give nearly $200,000 to Obama and the Democrats. Joining us to discuss the impact of sports on the national political scene is Bloomberg political analyst Matthew Dowd. Hey, Matt, presidential candidates usually get involved with sports because it makes them seem human. This year, it looks like the election is based on cold, hard cash, right?
Well, it's a huge part of cash. That's the main part of what's going on here. But you also have sports is actually a great entree to the working class, which is where ultimately this election is going to be finally decided. And how you do that, whether you attend games or what you do, or who do you align yourself with, becomes part of the mix.
Everyone now focusing on the battleground states, obviously. Romney has some key sports allies, Steve Ross in Florida, John Elway in Colorado, Dan Gilbert, the owner of Quicken Loans, and the Cavaliers in Ohio. Could this support be critical as we wind down toward Election Day?
I think in a close race where it's going to be decided by a couple of thousand votes in a few states like Ohio and places like that, those kind of things could trip a few votes. I think in the end it's going to be like who can motivate their base, who can do that. But I think those sports things, and don't be surprised to see over the next 2 weeks what happens in the final stages of this race is people showing up at key games in some of those Midwestern states, whether it's college football or pro football or sports events, to try to appeal to those voters.
Tigers in the World Series is a good example, and here's my other advice. If you're LeBron James and you want to be for Obama again, stay out of Ohio.
I think those sorts of things help. I think those absolutely help in the course of this race and how you sort of feel and what you align yourself with. I would rather be somebody that aligns myself with players, though, than owners, I think, in the course of this. I think people are much more support sort of the player alignment than the owner alignment.
Image is everything, and as always, campaigns and PACs are using sports imagery to get their message across. Here's an interesting example. Let's watch.
What's the most watched sport around here? It's the debate about what makes Debbie Stabenow the worst senator ever.
Okay, gentlemen. Game on. Your jobs, your boss.
How many more Michigan people are out of work since Stabenow took office? In your face.
Hey. Higher taxes, your play.
Higher taxes, fewer jobs.
After further review, the ruling on the field is you're both wrong.
Why?
The reason why Stabenow is the worst ever is because of her wasteful spending.
He's a replacement rep.
I guess they pay those people to be part of a commercial, but, you know, from a broader perspective, negativity, cynicism, we used to hold our athletes up on a pedestal. Does this say a lot about sports and politics and kind of the negativism that wasn't there before?
Well, I think it's just all the conflict that happens in the competition, and now it's all bled into each other, and the competition that exists on the field in sports has now become almost day-to-day what it is in politics. That was obviously a Michigan spot, and I think as you look at that spot, you can tell who they're trying to appeal to, which is working-class men. That spot is directly appealing to working-class men in a state like Michigan where the race is competitive. But all of this thing, conflict and everything in sports and politics, is now intermingled like everything else in life. It all becomes part of one another.
You know, Bill Bradley, Tom McMillan, Jim Bunning, those were heroes who were professional athletes that served our country in elected office and were basically above the fray. Now we have Heath Schuler coming up talking about his issue in the next segment. But we have athletes now that aren't really as viewed as kind of world-class role models or image guys today. But where is the future of athletes running, endorsers, moving the dial from that perspective?
Well, I think any time that you have celebrity, which sports can give you celebrity if you're highly successful in sports or you sort of known, especially in your congressional district or statewide, is very helpful because it's basically, sometimes it's stuff money can't buy. Yeah. And anytime you're known in that way, and if you're, as I say, if you're known successful, and then it's sort of you have a clean living outside of that, it's obviously very helpful in all of that. And so I think sports figures, like any celebrity, are always going to be people that the parties go to as possible candidates.
Less guys fitting that criteria. Do we have anybody waiting in the wings to replace these guys?
Well, I'm sure there are. I said one thing I think to keep an eye on in the future of this is women in sports. I think is a big potential thing, whether it's women owners or women that are active in the sports field. I think they have a great high potential to take that move from sports into politics.
Heard it first. Matthew Dowd, women sports athletes may move the needle. Thank you for joining us on Sportfolio, and we'll look forward to your Bloomberg election coverage right through November 6th.
My pleasure.
We're just getting started on the subject of sports and politics. Can America's mayors play a role in ending the NHL lockout? And could sports betting be coming to your state? We'll tackle these hot issues. But coming up, he made the jump from the NFL to Capitol Hill, where he now quarterbacks the House Pro Sports Caucus. Next man up, Congressman Heath Schuler, when Sportfolio returns. Welcome back to the special political edition of Sportfolio, tracing the connection between the business of sports and politics as we head into the economy election. Joining us now from Washington, D.C., Heath Schuler, the number 3 pick in the 1994 draft as a quarterback out of Tennessee, the best quarterback at Tennessee. Oh, I'm sorry, Peyton Manning maybe. 2006 Democratic representative from the 11th Congressional District of North Carolina. Congressman, welcome to Sportfolio. You're retiring after
thanks,
3
Rick.
terms in the House. Do you think it'll be harder to leave politics than it was to give up football?
No, I think leaving politics will be much easier. Football was so much a part of my life growing up and as a kid, and still today. I mean, whether I'm coaching my son or watching local high school football games or going over the mountain to the Tennessee games, you know, it's in your blood. It's hard to ever get over not playing the game.
You are one of the founding members, if not the founding member, of the Congressional Pro Sports Caucus. Why does pro sports need a caucus?
Well, I think it was important. If you look at what the divisiveness in Washington, what was bringing members of Congress together was athletics. Whether we played Democrats versus Republican in the baseball game or the members in both the Democrats and Republicans working and playing together on the same team and playing against the Capitol Hill Police to raise money. You know, that is what I was able to see is these members of Congress working together. And I felt that, you know, having a professional sports caucus, that would bring members of Congress from 2 political spectrums, bring them together. But it would also be an outlet for the industry itself to be able to have communications with members of Congress in case they needed something. You know, who can help them send a message throughout Congress of their intent, whether it be on drug policy or stadium issues of security during 9/11. You know, where is their outlet? And we wanted to make sure that there was members of Congress that would be able to, they could tell us and we could then tell the rest of the caucus and the rest of the Congress.
Concussions, BCS, all of those issues, you've had hearings in Congress from time to time. Where do you draw the line about issues that Congress should be involved in versus leaving it to private business?
Well, I think first and foremost is, let's leave as much as we possibly can to the industry itself and leave it to business. If they need the help and the assistance, or they are not looking at a particular area that needed to be addressed, I think the NFL has done a tremendous job, along with others, have done a great job at looking at head injuries, the concussions and the problems that has been arising from that, from all the data and the research that we have. They've done a very good job. I think part of it was also with Congress dealing with was to allow the sports industry to have a voice and say, here's what we're able to do, and here's the new technologies, whether it be new helmets or in NFL perhaps is, here's some penalties if we have head-to-head collisions. Now, on the other side of it, during all of the negotiations and debate between the owners and the players, I was so glad to see Congress stay out of it, because at this point in time in a recession, members of Congress did not need to be involved in, millionaires versus billionaires. That is not what the American people want to see.
Well, and how about the other issue, investigations, prosecutions? Do you think the Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens investigations and hearings were a good use of taxpayer money?
I think it was a complete waste of time. I think that the members of Congress should stay out of that. That had, that should have been totally with the courts and with the industry itself. The commissioner and baseball, and totally stay out of it. I don't think there is a place for that in Washington, and certainly we don't need to be using taxpayers' dollars for it.
Taxpayers, deficit, health care. We've got a lot of issues coming up. What are the most profound issues you think that affect the sports industry today?
I think that the most profound issue that we have facing not only the sports industry but the entire country and the world is our debt and deficit. We have continued to pile up more and more debt year after year, and we've, until the Bowles-Simpson is actually passed in Washington, D.C., and to get our fiscal house in order, that to me is the dark cloud facing America right now, for the simple fact that if we don't get that done, the economy will go down. People can't attend games. They can't buy the jerseys. They can't be able to reward their team by showing up at the games and spending money. They'll have to pull back, and entertainment sometimes is the area of which people pull back first.
Representative Heath Shuler, thank you for your service in Congress, and thanks for joining us on Sportfolio.
Thanks, Rick.
If New Jersey Republican Jon Runyon is reelected to his seat, he'll be the only NFL player in the 113th Congress. Unless, of course, Democrat Jimmy Ferris wins the race for Idaho's 1st congressional district. Ferris was a wide receiver for 4 NFL teams, which brings us to our Sportfolio stumper. Aside from Heath Shuler and Jon Runyon, what 3 NFL players went on to serve in the House of Representatives? Answer when we return. Here's the answer to this week's stumper. Besides Heath Shuler and Jon Runyon, the 3 former NFL players to serve in the House: Jack Kemp, Steve Largent, and longtime Nebraska football coach Tom Osborne. Welcome back to Sportfolio. This week we're examining the confluence of sports and politics on the eve of the 2012 elections. An issue that directly connects the two spheres: sports betting. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has declared that his state will grant sports betting licenses to casinos and racetracks starting in January 2013. That's in defiance of a federal ban that limits sports gambling to 4 states. The major professional sports leagues and the NCAA have filed a federal lawsuit to block New Jersey's legislation. Last week, the NCAA announced it'll pull its scheduled 2013 championships out of the state. Governor Christie says the state wants to give its casino industry an opportunity to compete for revenue that now goes to illegal operators. But does New Jersey really want to fall afoul of league policies on gambling? We asked New York University sports management professor Lee Eagle to give us insight into Christie's political game plan.
What does Governor Christie have to gain out of this? Certainly something politically. He's a national figure at this point, and he may make we don't know if he'll make a run at something bigger than the governor's office, but if he has anything to gain out of it, it certainly benefits him now. in a different way than it ever did before, to take a run of sorts at the NFL and the NCAA and show them who Governor Christie is.
But it's also a conundrum. You have a significant stand he's taking, but there's a lot to lose, potentially. Division I, NCAA, those events, Final Four, maybe Super Bowl. So it is a little bit of a risky trade-off, isn't it?
Traditionally, if we look at things past 20, 30, 40 years, we would have seen, a team or a league would have said, we're not going to be here much longer if you do this. But I think what Governor Christie is reading, which many people aren't, is that this is a new and different time. And so the idea of the NFL saying, we're going to take the Super Bowl from you, well, that also means they're going to take it from the New York Giants and the New York Jets and some beloved ownership. We'll see the same sorts of things happening with the NCAA, where the angles that they used to play won't necessarily work today.
For more on this topic, we're joined by sports consultant and columnist extraordinaire Andy Dolich from Bloomberg San Francisco Bureau. Andy, right now there's a geographical wall between pro sports and legalized betting. None of the 4 states that allow sports betting have pro sports teams. But what happens if that wall tumbles down?
This is the final frontier. I mean, sports has broken through a lot of these walls, naming rights on uniforms, stadiums, and I think this is going to be the thorny issue of the next few years. What happens is it's going to be a money grab, and unfortunately in sports, the dollar sign rules.
Commercial casinos now operate in 22 states. Measures on the November ballot to authorize table games in Rhode Island, Oregon, Maryland, and approve a new casino just outside Washington, D.C. And the Redskins, by the way, endorsed that initiative. Are the leagues out of step with their constituents?
Well, not really. I mean, the leagues have been somewhat flexible. When I was with the Memphis Grizzlies, Tunica, Mississippi, which not a lot of people know, is one of the leading gambling locations with 14 casinos in the soybean fields of Mississippi. We generated a few $1 million a year from pure advertising. The difference, Rick, was that any casino that has a sports book is not allowed to be involved with any team in the NBA. None of the Tunica casinos had sports books, so we were allowed to take their advertising, but just for the entertainment aspect, not for the gaming aspect. So I think there's going to be a greater push for leagues and teams to generate revenue. How it is defined, as you say, will keep lawyers busy for years to come.
We love the idea of keeping lawyers busy for years to come. But
I knew you'd like that.
Yeah. Let's talk about Chris Christie's argument. Does it make sense to you that people will bet anyway, so you might as well legalize it?
No, I don't, because people do a lot of things that are illegal, and that doesn't mean that we should legalize them. You know, I think there's a cautionary tale here. You look at performance-enhancing drugs in baseball, specifically steroids. You look at what's happened with Lance Armstrong here in the last few days. Again, there needs to be a wall put between illegal activities and what people are paying tremendous money to see, which is the greatest athletes in the world do their thing in hopefully an unscripted setting every time they play.
Andy Dolich, as always, thanks for your perspective.
Thank you, Rick.
Still ahead, NHL owners and players are locked in a labor stalemate. So who's standing up for the local businesses that depend on hockey? A mayor who sees the lockout as a political issue joins us next on Sportfolio. Basketball season is just around the corner. Next week, I go one-on-one with David Stern. The NBA commissioner holds forth on the financial health of the league, competitive balance, and the future of Linsanity. That's Wednesday at 9:30 on Sportfolio. At the local level, several ballot measures in front of voters will have an impact on sports fans across a much wider area. In El Paso, Texas, Proposition 3 authorizes a 2% hotel tax to finance a $50 million baseball stadium. The San Diego Padres moved their AAA Tucson farm team to El Paso once funding is approved. El Paso will also vote on nearly $500 million in quality of life improvement bonds. I've been involved in crafting and advancing these initiatives through my consulting firm, Haro Sports Ventures. One of the major stops on the pro tennis tour, the Sony Open Tennis Tournament, has been played at Miami's Crandon Park Tennis Center since 1994. Voters in Miami-Dade County will vote yea or nay on referendum number 238, which authorizes improvement to the facilities and extension of the tournament's lease agreement.
They're going to go home unhappy because we're keeping our damn Coyotes.
The NHL Phoenix Coyotes are trying to finalize a sale that would lift the club out of bankruptcy and keep it in town. Voters in Glendale, Arizona could put a wrench in the works by approving Proposition 457. The measure would repeal a sales tax increase that funds an arena management fee to be paid to the new owners. Recently, the U.S. Conference of Mayors took a stand on the NHL lockout, calling on owners to save the hockey season because of the collateral damage to local economies. The mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota, Chris Coleman, led this appeal, and he joins us now from Minneapolis. Mr. Mayor, the Minnesota Wild play in your city. What's the economic impact when they don't play?
Well, it's tremendous. If you go back to 2004, it's hard to get an exact handle on it, but there was a tremendous amount of revenue that was lost, not only for the city, but all the business owners that were dependent upon that. Bar owners, people that worked in the restaurants, hotel owners. We lose money on our parking revenue. It just kind of multiplies over and over again. And so if we go through another season like 2004 where the season is washed out, or even if the strike goes on for a little bit longer, we're going to see some real challenges for our businesses and our employees in downtown.
Mr. Mayor, the dreaded replacement argument, some critics argue that this is not money that's lost, but it just gets spent elsewhere in the community. What say you?
Well, first of all, you have to look at it from the standpoint of someone like Tom Reed, former NHL player that opened up a restaurant a block away from the XL, or the restaurants. Their whole economy is dependent upon a dollar being spent in a certain location, and so it may be true that it's distributed somewhere else, but for that bar owner, the hotel owner, the waitress that is dependent upon that extra income to put her kids in a hockey program, it may not be of much comfort that the dollar is going to be spent somewhere else in the metro area.
Now, the Wild play in the XL Energy Center, and it's built with state funds and owned by the city. Do you feel lockout is a breach of a public-private partnership or public-private trust with the NHL team?
Well, from our perspective, first of all, the Wild have been a great partner with the city of St. Paul. Craig Leopold, the owner, has been a tremendous partner, great guy. I mean, I know he wants the strike ended. They're going to pay their bills, so that's not the challenge for us. But I think that in this discussion, what's lost is the community that supports our teams across the country, whether it's in St. Paul or New York or Buffalo or anywhere else. The fact of the matter is there are folks out there that are going to be hurt by this strike, and it may not be the owners and it may not be the players. All we're asking them is to put a little consideration into this and get to yes. I was very optimistic last week when I saw that the owners had come to the table with a fairly substantial step forward, but very disappointed that the reaction from the players was, we're not moving in that direction. I'm not taking sides. I'm not an expert on all the ins and outs of the economics of hockey, but I do know the impact on my community, and it's going to be very dramatic.
Chris Coleman, quintessential public steward and obviously big-time hockey fan. For the sake of St. Paul and hockey fans everywhere, you hope your voice is heard. Thanks for joining us on Sportfolio.
Thank you very much.
Well, that'll do it for this edition of Sportfolio. Our thanks to Matthew Dowd, Congressman Heath Schuler, Andy Dolich, Lee Eagle, and Mayor Chris Coleman for taking part in this discussion. And thank you for watching. For more Bloomberg coverage of the economy election, visit Bloomberg.com. And please don't sit on the sidelines. Cast your vote on November 6th. I'm Rick Horrow. See you next time.